Hi, everybody. All right, let's do this. Awesome. So nice to meet you. And hopefully we'll get to meet even more after the session. Yeah, how crazy is that? Like, I saw Mark, like, right backstage, and I'm like, wait, I know you. And he's like, yeah, 15 years. Anyone know J-Boss? Good times, man, good times. Some of the best years of my life, actually. So anyway, I won't be going that far back in my little history journey of what I've done, but those were good days. So super cool. Like, it's such a small world. For those of you who are like relatively new to this space, like, if you stay, you create friends for life. So it's really cool to see. So yes, I am Noelle Russell. I always put this up. I think I have to put it up prematurely because right now you might be thinking to yourself like, she might say something interesting. But at the end, you're gonna be like, where was the QR code? So I put it up. You could just take a picture. Maybe later, if you decide, you could actually click the link that shows up. But this is a chance for us to connect, like, for reals on the LinkedIn. I think that's a LinkedIn QR code. But it'll give us a chance. I encourage you to connect with me. They just expanded the amount of people I can truly connect with, which means, like Mike Rosado, who's here, he sent me a message. Like, Mike is awesome. Where is Mike? Mike, are you here? You were eating. Where are you? Oh, amazing. Oh, hi, Mike. So he brought me here because he sent me a message. It was like, you want to do this? I'm like, yes. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I hope you all will enjoy the journey. So here we go. All right, let's see. Does it work? All right, awesome. So I'm going to start my journey. I'm not going to tell you the history yet, but a little glimpse into the journey I've been on over the last 25 years is that I was at IBM. I mean, a lot of people end up there at some point. But I was at IBM. I was there 12 years in a time when some of you might remember, service-oriented architecture was just becoming a thing. And most of the people I talked to were mainframe or at least procedural programmers trying to figure out client-server. Like, that was the day. But at that time, Jim Whitehurst, anyone know? Anyway, he was the CEO of Red Hat. Good times. But he was the CEO of Red Hat, and he had mentioned this quote. He had said, I got this really cool quote. It was in an all hands, and it was all about what we were doing in middleware at Red Hat, which was a new thing at the time. And he said this, but then later, I go on to Amazon, and Jeff Bezos ends up tweeting it out, saying, I have my kids read this. It's on our fridge. And then Satya Nadella puts it up, one of his leaders puts it up in an all-hands group at Microsoft. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I got curious, and I actually love this quote. So I'm going to read it to you. I know you're not supposed to do this, but it's lunch, so now's your chance. Like, relax, enjoy the cake. And I'll read this to you, and then I'll tell you an interesting story about it. So this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. How many of you know this person, Ralph Waldo Emerson? Like, he's a guy. He's pretty good, poet laureate, pretty smart guy. Everyone likes him. So he says, what is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child or a garden patch or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. I personally found a little bit of comfort knowing that the leaders of these huge tech companies were like, wow, that Ralph guy knows what he's doing. However, one day I get off a stage just like this and someone walks up to me, a nice gentleman, and says, you should look into that. And I was like, I will. I'm coachable. I'll look into that. So I went and Googled this quote, and not on page 1 or 2, but on page 3, I found out that it wasn't Ralph after all. It was actually Bessie. Bessie Anderson Stanley wrote a very adorable poem about all of these things. And I realized in that moment, being a data person, that my job is really to protect the lineage of the stories that we tell from a data perspective. And so I got very interested, kind of more broadly, in making sure that we not only build good tech and we build good tools and good automation, but we also do it responsibly and safely. To give you a little bit more context with Bessie, if you reread this, like once I found out it was Bessie who wrote it, I reread it and I was like, okay, like I get the whole children and the garden patch, like that doesn't really seem like a Ralph Waldo Emerson thing. So it made sense to me that Bessie wrote it, but she got lost as the story was told. And we all end up, and I don't mean this like on stage storytellers, but in the work we do, we take data and we tell stories. And you're going to do this with all sorts of data. I don't mean in the purest sense, but anytime you build something, you're building it off of something else. Very, very few times, unless you're maybe at Stanford, there's a couple people in here who have actually built something when nothing else existed, but John. But when we go into the world, especially now, of generative AI, it's really important to think about that all the cool things you're doing is being built on the fact that somebody else wrote a GitHub repo that was ingested first. And it's okay. Like, I actually love that my GitHub repos were ingested and code. Other people write better code because I did that. That makes me happy. It's why I worked at Red Hat. But the responsibility is kind of on me to make sure that I always say, like, protect the Bessies, you know? Like, make sure that you don't lose sight of who actually helped you get to where you are. And you'll see that kind of throughout the whole thing. But it's interesting because I always thought it was Ralph. And then I was like, oh no, it's Ralph. Because Ralph did make it more popular. Bessie probably wasn't going to go on every stage. She had children. I have 6. I totally get it. Like, you just don't get to do all the things you want to do sometimes. But he took her message to market, but she got lost in the shuffle. So as you start to do really cool things, think about the lineage of where it came from. And that's kind of how we'll start today. This is why I do what I do. These are my gaggle of humans. Yes, I did get all of them into a picture, but it's extremely rare. So you can see them over there, my 6, my husband here, my high school sweetheart, all like fine and good. Why should I show this to you? Well, my son there in the pool, his name's Max, he was born with Down syndrome 18 years ago. I was like 4, it was tough. 4. But 18 years ago, he was born, and I remember them telling me, like, he has nowhere to go from here. Like, it's your first child, you should probably put him up for adoption. There's families that know how to deal with this. And first, I'm a Latina, so I don't just do that. I don't okay. And then second, I'm a technologist. So I instantly was like, oh, we're going to do some stuff. So I started looking around, and as you go and check out my LinkedIn, you'll see I curated a career across companies that gave me the opportunity to make the world better for him. And it is. We have over 135 voice or AI-enabled devices in our house, and they are heavily used. Many of you have a lot of devices, but you maybe not don't use them. I used to buy a lot of devices that I never used, but he promoted this concept of accessibility in our house. And then my dad, as I journeyed into this world of creating more accessible tech, I realized that the accessible tech I built actually helped everybody. Not only did it help my kids, but it also helped the people I work with. It helped the neurodiversity that I experience in my office every day. All of my engineers, everyone thinks a little bit differently. And as I increased the ways that they could use technology, everyone got better. Everyone was able to do more. So my dad, when I went to, I guess this was, 10 years ago, this year, I got an email from Jeff Bezos. And it sent me on a journey to Amazon Alexa. So he sent an email out, and you might get these emails, and sometimes you do, like a lot of people at Amazon did at that time. I got an email, and it said, we're looking for new people to be part of this new thing, and we're not really sure what it is or how it's gonna work, but we need you, right? It's that like Bill Murray meme where he's like, right, like, you're the one, come. So I immediately was like thinking through the lens of my dad and my son. And the reason I was thinking through the lens of my dad, which I didn't at the time know, is that he's just an aging individual and getting access to tech is hard. I don't know how many of you know this, but like we have QR codes all over the place. Do you know that anyone over the age of 70, it's really hard for them to get a QR code? Like parking, I know an older 80-year-old couple who tried to go park and go on a cute little date, and they could not figure out how to hold the phone over the thing still enough to click the link that kept moving. They were super frustrated. They just went home. They just went home. Like, we're doing this, right? We're evolving our technology and be like, oh my gosh, you can just point a phone at that. There's a whole bunch of people that can't use phones. There's a whole bunch of people that can't hold it still enough to catch a QR code. Some of us can't catch a QR code. I watch, anyway, we have to be careful with what we build. So Jeff Bezos opened up this team. I was employee 10 on Amazon Alexa. It was the best thing I ever did, but everyone at that time told me, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Like, this is not real work. They even told me it wasn't real AI. And maybe it wasn't back then. But it was a dream. It was a vision of what it could be. And that's what I do today, is I have a vision of what DevOps could be in the world of conversation, being able to leverage your voice to do more. I have one of the fun facts that I have to live with every day is I've hired over 2,000 data engineers, practitioners, data scientists. Not one of them was in a wheelchair. I never interviewed anyone in a wheelchair, ever. Like, isn't that not, like, that's broken. Something's broken there, because I now know a bunch of people who happen to be in wheelchairs that are quite brilliant, but I never interviewed one. Anyway, so it's broken. So I have a vision of us fixing it, because some people can't type on a keyboard. My dad ended up, I think, 3 weeks after Alexa launched, my pride and joy. 3 weeks after Alexa launched, he got hit by a car, suffered a traumatic brain injury. Now, do you know Finding Dory or 50 First Dates, 10-Minute Tom? He's not as bad as 10-Minute Tom, but he's pretty bad. Like, where he asked the same question over and over, like as if he had never just asked it. And if any of you are caregivers, you know the potential frustration that bubbles up in your voice. But guess what? Alexa has no frustration. Answers the same question. I even hear it now, and I get frustrated just listening to it. But he will ask the same question, like, what day is it today? Oh my gosh, during COVID, how many COVID cases were announced today? All day long. And Alexa every time would be like, absolutely, Irving. Here's your answer. Awesome. I'll see you next time. That's fantastic. It was the best invention ever made for caregivers. So I got to go on a really cool journey. Starting at Alexa, I built over 100 applications for Alexa. I was the only software engineer on the team for a very long time. And what that means is that I was very interested in productizing machine learning. Like, how are you actually going to get that out the door? Who's going to use it? How are you going to fix it? Who's going to train it? Where data scientists were narrowly focused on, but look what, like, we built a model that can understand speech. That's pretty phenomenal. And it was. But everything, and I mean everything in my world of technology, has to be used by somebody eventually. It has to be operationalized, productized. And so that's where I spent most of my time. And so you can see a lot of that. Here I am, over there, I am AWS certified because, of course, I was at Amazon. I like the hyperscalers or the cloud providers like my children. I love them all. I don't think my children necessarily want to be compared to hyperscalers, but I don't think hyperscalers care that much. But you can see I've done a lot of cool stuff. But one of the things I've learned along the way is that you now today, I mean, for example, you could right now ask a GPT model to build you a firewall. Or better yet, you can ask it to act like a firewall and write its own rules. And, oh yeah, okay, so can the cyber attacker people. Yeah, I know, yes, they can too. But you can build and get from zero to something faster than we've ever been able to do before, right? Power, capability. But as we all know, maybe we don't. Let's see if we're like true friends and family. But, I often say we've got more power than ever, but with great power. All right, good. Whew, we are family. Yes, Uncle Ben or Voltaire for the other people in the room. But Uncle Ben said it best. Like, you are now going to be able to do things by just asking for it. And it gets better every day. And oh, guess what? It gets better when you actually use it. The more you, meaning you specifically in the seats, use the models to do these types of tasks, it gets better at these tasks. One of my favorite things to do is to build specific infrastructure. And then I'll be like, by the way, could you look at that infrastructure? What grade would you give it? and I'll ask the model to grade the infrastructure that I've designed. And it'll say it's a C. Almost always gives me a C. I think that's part of the game, maybe. But almost always gives me a C. And I'm like, great, what would you do to make it better? And it gives me all this like text-based advice on how I could do better. And I'm like, great, could you just rewrite it better? And it did. And then I ask it to grade itself again. Guess what? Its version gets a B. But it's not an A. So I go through this. It's called chain of thought prompting. I continuously prompt this model to build me better and better rules. This could be firewall rules if you're in that space. This could be building a dev environment. It could be anything. I mean, you name it, right? The burden is on us as the prompters, the prompt engineers. The burden's on us to leverage the model. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that model is. So just making sure, because I am talking about generative AI, how many of you have put your fingers on a keyboard on a GPT-type model? Don't be shy. Okay, you won't get fired, like not here. Someplace you might. I think at Accenture we have a rule, which I broke like the day it came out, but don't be that person. But playing with it, we will normalize using this every single day. There are things you should never do in a DevOps lifecycle that can easily be augmented, and I don't mean taken over, but augmented with this capability. But I'm going to share a little bit more about what that is with you. So there are some principles, though, that need to be in place in order for you to fully leverage the amplification that comes with a model like this. And I don't just mean generative AI, AI as a whole, but generative AI you could start using today. Typical, traditional AI, you'd have to have data scientists. They'd have to build you a model. The model would then have to work. That work would then have to be tested before you ever get your hands on it, which is why there's not a whole lot of B2C model development in the DevOps space. However, there's lots of companies that do it, don't get me wrong. But even then, they have a team of data scientists that are building models. Today, you don't have to do that because the world of generative AI gives us the ability to leverage. We get to build on top of what I call the shoulders of giants, right? Microsoft, Google, AWS, they're all building models that we can now leverage that are trained at least a little bit on technology, on tech stacks. And what isn't trained, we can train it. But that big amount of work to just get a model that functions, we don't have to do. And that massively accelerates our opportunity. So the first thing, though, I have like 3 principles that I like to make sure you understand before we dive into the generative piece, and I have a few demos I want to show you. 1, inclusive engineering is a term that I use to represent not just, yes, you need to have inclusive teams. I was the only woman and Latina on the Alexa team at the beginning. I actually didn't even notice because they were all my friends, and we had a great time, and it's not like I felt like a loner until I started talking about solutions for the classroom. And solutions for, as a caregiver for my dad. Like, I was in a room full of people who were not parents yet. They weren't caregivers yet. They couldn't even really think in that way. And so my unique perspective pushed the envelope of the solutions that we were going to build. And I know it's a little different than your world because we were building B2C. We were going from, we were building a technology that the entire world would use. But it's still very important to make sure that you have an inclusive understanding because these models work better when they're asked the same question from different angles. Again, chain of thought prompting. How do we continuously train the model to do what we want? We ask it good questions. And sometimes it gets it wrong. Many times at the beginning it gets it wrong. Alexa was wrong all the time. But the cool thing about it was that people didn't care that much that it was wrong because they loved the idea that you could talk to your tech. And the same thing happens with my developers, right? So as I build conversational interfaces for our DevOps infrastructure, for really our pipeline, as we build that, sometimes it doesn't work. But they keep trying. They keep trying to ask questions and they keep trying to talk to it because it's the dream. Oh my gosh, why would I ever type something if I could just ask for it? And I'll tell you why that's important in just a second. So inclusive engineering is not just the people. The other side is the data. And especially in an environment like this, the data actually comes from those who have done the work. So I've put in my reps, as they say, on a lot of these projects, hundreds of these projects. And inclusive engineering is not just I want to make sure I have a team that represents a bunch of different perspectives, but I also want to make sure that the data I'm using is very representative. I also want to make sure that the domain expertise I have access to is representative, because it's only going to be as good as what we teach it to do. So your skills, if you have 20 years of experience doing whatever, that model can now learn from you. You can be its teacher, like a Jedi, kind of. It's better than Skynet, right? So I'm going to stick to the Jedi analogy. It's less scary. So inclusive engineering is one piece. The next thing is thinking about multimodal development. Now, this is the new world. So as you think about what you do every single day, which is pretty siloed into a specific set of tools, what happens when you can do that work, dare I say it, in the metaverse? Like, it still exists. I don't know if you know. It's still out there. Like, we still have a metaverse we could get into. It's very good when we're building out infrastructure in organizations that focus on supply chain, right? Or who focus on demand and supply sensing and those types of things, or even manufacturing of any kind. Having a practical view of the world, but it's also very, I'll date myself. Well, not really. There was a new one, a Minority Report world, right? Not the bad side where we predict that you're going to be a bad person, but the cool side of having pictures that you can like move around in your view, right? So that is something like, imagine if you have your infrastructure, whether it's your data center in person, like on-prem. I won't make you raise your hand, but I know we all have on-prem data, even though the cloud's awesome. And then even your cloud, but be able to just grab it and put it in places, right? Orchestrate an architecture instead of building it on PowerPoint, building it in real life. It's way more fun, and you end up getting pretty interesting, different results. So building multimodal means don't just think about how do I build this in a PowerPoint and get it approved. Like, what are the different ways that our team can engage that will touch all of the different parts of our brain? The creative side, the analytical side, right? The introverted side, the extroverted side. Like the cat owners and dog owners, they're very different people. And so we should, bring in their perspectives. Let them help build different modalities. So I was at National Public Radio during the pandemic. I was hired basically to help be their kind of CTO. They didn't have one at the time. And we were thinking about building solutions from the ground up. And that building, I had a team that built a web app. I had a team that built for mobile, 2 of them actually, because one was for iOS, one was for Google. I had another team on voice, 2 of those, and none of them converged. They all had different roadmaps. They all had different user experiences. And if you remember NPR at that time, if you went to the website, you could start something, but if you went to the mobile app, you couldn't finish it. You'd have to start over and you even have to find the thing. It's better now. But back then, we weren't thinking in this kind of centralized, multimodal fashion. So no matter what you do, what task you're going after, think about what are all the different ways I might do this task to accommodate as many people as possible. And our people are typically developers or sysadmins. So how do we accommodate the way they work every day? And generative AI gives us the ability to actually build custom, personalized tooling that they can use in the way that they want to. If they're textual, they can type. If they want to use their voice, they can talk. If they want to see it in a table, we can generate a table. If they want to see it in pretty print JSON, we could do that. Like, it's complete, and we don't actually have to do it. We just ask a model to do it on our behalf. So the future is a little bit on this world. I know there's a lot of hype around generative AI, and a lot of us are like, I know it's coming. But I will tell you that I've seen this like 10 years ago when we started building Amazon Alexa. We saw the world change because they could say it instead of click it, right? They didn't need a button or an app or a phone. They could just talk. And we adopted that for our own operational purposes, as you know, or maybe you don't. But Amazon does a lot of the things they end up pushing to market. They do it internally first, right? Like Code Whisperer is an AWS tool. We have a similar one, GitHub Copilot. I'm going to show you a couple demos so you can see what this looks like. But what's a world where you can train a model to take all of we call it, like at Accenture, we have this idea of Accenture on its best day, which means like everyone's firing, like everyone's working well together, we're coming up with great ideas. It's like beautiful. You leave that day like, I love it here. It's not every day. But most of the time, no. Anyway, on its best day, everyone's doing cool stuff and you all feel like you're part of this amazing journey. How do you bottle that up and make that available to everyone every day? That's something that we've tested out at Accenture and something that I'm going to share a little bit about with you. Now, part of the journey that I've been on, none of the roles that I've ever taken, from leading AWS, going to Alexa, leaving Alexa to go launch Microsoft Cognitive Services. So I took 17 research models and productized them as a software engineer. That's what I do. And back then, those models were little baby models getting about 100 calls a month. Those same models today get about 5 billion inferences or calls a month. Do you know that the infrastructure choices we made 6 years ago, like we made a couple tweaks to it, but for the most part, that's the same infrastructure we decided on when we started, because we set a big intention and everyone thought we were crazy. And now they're billion inference models. At the time, our parents weren't even calling them, even though they were like in Snapchat anyway. We made it easy. People wouldn't use AI 5 years ago. And now I'm like telling people to like slow down and stop using AI until they learn a little bit more. So none of these roles, though, that I've ever had, did I know what I was doing before I got there. So as you are in your role today, whatever it is, thinking about how it applies and how generative AI or AI as a whole applies to it is extremely important. I'm sure you've seen the meme that says, AI is not going to replace you. Anyone know the other side of that? Someone using AI is going to replace you. Because it is a co-pilot world. AI doesn't operate as much as we want to say and DeepMind wants to pontificate. It doesn't work without us. At least not yet. I know, I'm trying not to scare you. But right now, it is a co-pilot augmentation. It is, how do we help you do what you do every day better? And those that are using AI to do what they do better are going to be far ahead, and they're going to deliver results far faster than those who are trying to do it the old-fashioned way. And it actually reminds me of those days when I was at IBM trying to teach people to let go of certain text-based development tools and to move to this new concept in IDE. And it was tough. It took years for people to realize an IDE might save them time. Anyone still like an Emacs? No, don't. No. I know you're out there. I see you. So let's take a quick look in my last few minutes here. Okay, cool. In my last few minutes here at the world of generative AI, specifically for DevOps. It applies to everything. I use it in my personal life. I use it I think I used it today. I can't remember what for. Thank goodness. It was a task I didn't want to do, so I did it on GPT. I copied it. I pasted it. I did read it because sometimes it's nonsense. And then I pasted it up. Oh, my LinkedIn post. Sorry, Mike. My LinkedIn post today was written in GPT. And it was good. I was like, okay, yeah, that's legit. But here's the cool thing. GPT today, GPT-4, even in the open research model that is OpenAI, today they allow you to ground that model. Yeah, you got to pay for it. But they allow you to ground it, which means you get to tell the model what truth is to you. Otherwise, it's basing truth on its pre-trained information. If you know a little bit about GPT, GPT it stands for generative, right? Which means its job is to generate. Another way to say that is lie, create, completely fabricate. That's its job. It's the first word. I don't know why people freak out when it makes up stuff. I'm like, that's what it does. So it generates stuff out of other stuff, and sometimes out of predictive stuff, but it's generating things. The second thing is it's pre-trained, and pre-training means it went to the world's knowledge base, the internet. I know some of you are scared already. The internet. And that internet, right, I think we're at trillions of words, hundreds of millions of websites. So that's great news because this model is pre-trained on massive amounts of data, running on massive hardware. You guys might appreciate this. I say this to some people and they're like, I don't know what you're saying. But GPT 3.5 Turbo requires 28,000 CPUs and 10,000 GPUs just to do the thing. And now, do you know how many GPT-3-like models we are trying to build? Can you imagine? Think about the number, silicon. Anyway, it's going to get very interesting. NVIDIA, that's a stock. No, I didn't say that. But it's interesting times, right? Like they are in the right place. Who knew? Because NVIDIA used to be like the nerdy kids hangout. Like that was the booth where all the nerds hung out last time I checked. But they are very much in this space today because we need massive amounts of hardware in order to process this much data. But back to the data, trillions of words, hundreds of millions of websites have been scraped into this model. So I always like to kind of think about who wrote that information, like who wrote the data that it's trained on. And no matter where your mind goes, it's not everybody. Not everyone in the world has a web server that they can publish content to the internet on. Now, even with GoDaddy, like not everyone can do that. So it immediately is flawed. It's immediately a flawed model because it doesn't have an inclusive data set of everybody. It just has whoever could get data on the internet and get that into the model over the last 20 years. And even then, it has its own biases. So once you identify that pre-training is extremely valuable, but it's also a big risk because it's not grounded in humanity. It doesn't know humanity. It doesn't know truth. It just knows a bunch of people's websites. And that's a little bit scary when one of the biggest challenges in responsible use of technology is over-reliance on artificial intelligence. And ChatGPT accelerated that over-reliance by giving everyone zero training and a text box. And now we're like, well, that seems like a good answer. I should use that. Oh, wait, it's completely fabricated. Anyone heard about that guy in DC who created his case? Whole entire case in front of a judge was fabricated by GPT, and he didn't realize it until he submitted it. I'm sorry, but think about things. But anyway, so he struggled. Samsung, a little bit more closer to home, right? That developer was amazing, was looking at, all of us have done this, looked at code for way too long and have been like, for goodness sakes, I'm just gonna walk away, or worse, right? That guy comes behind you and is like, oh, it's right there. Ew. Don't do that. At least pretend to look at it for 5 minutes. But this guy was like, oh my gosh, there's ChatGPT. So he copied and pasted the entire, mindfully too long anyway, needed to be refactored, but long piece of code of Samsung's proprietary logic into ChatGPT. And guess what? Immediately solved his problem. Immediately. Fixed it. He was a rock star. He went to all his friends in the company. He's like, I did that, that's amazing. And then he got fired. Actually, I don't know if he got fired, but he probably got fired. If not, he definitely got in trouble because 3 weeks later, the news ended up sharing that now anyone asking questions about a Samsung code base could get a predictive answer from the model. Because the model, it's like the man who cannot be named or whatever, but the model cannot be untrained. Once you train it, it can't be untrained. It's a monolith. So once that code was in there, it was done. It was over. And so Samsung put in some rules. Italy put in the same rules. Lock it down. Get rid of it. Nobody should use this thing. That wasn't the right answer either. So I want to share with you just a couple examples. Maybe, I think are you pulling the chain on me? How much, am I good? Okay, I'm good. All right, I'm good. Just making sure. I get all excited, and then they're like, it's time. It's so fun talking about this. Okay, so this is the journey I always tell people about, which means that generative AI, though cool, fun, fascinating, is not new. It is a hammer, a new hammer, shiny, bedazzled. However, it is not a new one. And with that, though, I always like to say, we have a lot of problems we can solve, and generative AI, these GPT models, are really interesting hammers we can use to solve them, but not everything is a nail. There are lots of things you're just not going to use this for. However, the things I'm going to talk to you about are easy, low-hanging fruit that you should probably think about. And developers don't like doing it anyway, and you want them to do it better. So it's a win-win. This is a quick crash course, and you'll get this deck, but this is a quick crash course in what GPT stands for. I remember I mentioned generative, pre-trained. The last one is magic. Anyone know what the T stands for? Transformers! Like more than meets the eye, anyway. So transformers, huge. There's a paper written by Percy Liang. I actually studied with him at Stanford, and he wrote this paper called Attention is All You Need. And it changes the world for conversation because now the model can remember the stuff you built yesterday and the day before and the day before that. As opposed to saying, hey, I want to build this, and it'd be like, great, tell me all the things that you need to build it. You don't have to do that. You don't need that level of granularity because it has memories like the human brain. But just like the human brain, memories are strong and some memories are weak. And so we want to make sure that when you're thinking about using this model, that you understand that it's very similar to the human brain. That it can, you'll notice here, it's self-supervised. So as it experiences things, i.e. you talk to it, prompt it, it's going to learn behaviors. Your prompting can teach it things, and you might not even be trying to. So being very intentional there. And then my favorite is second from the bottom, you don't even need data. Like data used to be the gatekeeper to AI. You don't need it anymore. I will go to GPT-4 and ask it to generate for me a transcript. Generate for me WebSphere server logs circa 2012. It's amazing. I'm just saying, try it. Is amazing. What can you do, right, when you don't actually need to go and access it? When what you're trying to solve for and test for, you don't actually need that. So this is my really long slide to say there are 3 things every production use case with generative AI needs. One is accuracy. It has to be right. Today we have a framework called retrieval augmented generation, which means you're going to tell the model exactly where to go to retrieve its data. And I'm going to show you a demo for that right now. And then I'm done, I think, ish. No, for real. Okay, let's see if I can show you. Demos, live demos. I always make people very nervous. Okay, I'm going to back this up just a second, hopefully. There we go. So imagine if you could take all of the documentation that you've written, okay, whatever docs you got, and you could infuse it into a model so it could think like you. And it could, maybe not you, but like you're the smartest person in your room, or all the best practices, best known methods. This is an example of that. These files that you see, can you see? Oh, maybe you can see it over there. I can't see it. But these files are like PDFs, hopefully. It's not working? Oh, all right, hold on. All right. How does that happen? Okay, let's see. Should I like unplug it and replug it in? Okay. AV saying yes. All right, hold on. I know, right? It's got to happen. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it now. That's better. There we go. We're back. Oh, I see. Control B. No. Yes, there we go. Sorry. I see what happened. Thank you very much for that. There we go. That's what happens when you show up late to your tech check, so thank you. All right, awesome. So you see here, these are all different PDFs. You could think about, if you go to AWS, Microsoft, Google, they all have architectural guidelines. They have, taking the certification, if you're certified, you know, like there's tons of white papers. What if you could ingest all that information into a bot and provide some kind of developer support? And I don't mean like emotional support, though that would be awesome. More like, advice, strategic advice on how to build code. So you can see here, I'm just going to play it so you can see it. Of course, I could do this live, but you know what happens. Like, I've been educated enough now to not do live demos, super live. But this is built on GitHub. You can see here, we've grounded the model in all of those PDFs, and we told the model, do not use anything else. Don't use what you've been trained on. Don't use your memories. Just use this. It's called retrieval. It's called RAG if you want to look it up, retrieval augmented generation. It removes the option for hallucinations. It does not remove the option for bad intel. So if your data is bad, which oftentimes if you have Microsoft and Google side by side, sometimes their advice conflicts, and the model will guess in those cases, and it could guess wrong, so you have to train it by using it, by asking it. So you can kind of see some of the examples here. This is just an advice bot. We built this for our own teams in order to help them build it. We also took 400 developers and leveraged Codex at the time because GitHub Copilot was not approved by our company. So we used Codex, and what we were able to do was reduce 35% of their time spent in DevOps type activities by giving them the ability to, oh my gosh, they could submit tickets without ever writing a ticket. I'll just let it sink in. Like, yeah, some of us know the pain of this. Like, not that tickets have to go away. They're still there. Ticket history is still good. But what if I could just ask, like, summarize the history? What if I could just generate a ticket automatically because it already knows the problem? What if I could do pull requests automatically because the context is already in my environment? There's so much of these little things that eat away our day and our happiness that make it really difficult for us to do what we do best, which is really create. And part of this new world is, I call it bring back the backlog, is really letting you rethink, like, don't try and put a Band-Aid on the way we are doing things today. It actually is faster for you to rethink about the problem from its origin and how you might solve it in a brand new way with this technology. It's cheaper to do that. It's cost effective, of course, but it's also extremely fast. And so I have a bunch of demos. So I will be here for the rest of the day, but I just hope this gave you an insight into some of the really cool things that we're doing in this space. The opportunity is less about, hey, go learn generative AI, though I do have a list of resources in my deck. That's me. What is more important is that you actually just start playing with it. Ask a model to build you a web server and see what happens. I'll end with, did I say that already? Seriously this time. I'll end with, I just today was building the deck for this session, and a GPT model can build anything in text. It's not really good at building you a PowerPoint presentation, unless you know how PowerPoint presentations are built. Anyone know the language PowerPoint presentations are built in? It's a VBA script. Right? So that's what I did. I asked it, build first. I said, write me a talk track that's engaging and fun and will get people excited. And it wrote me a talk. Great. Now build a VBA script to mirror that talk track. Boom. I copied it, pasted it in as a macro. I am feeling like this is awesome. And it doesn't work. It's fine. I go back to the model and I'm like, hey, buddy, it doesn't work. And I didn't say buddy, but I totally said, hey, it didn't work. And he wrote, oh, the model says, you're right, I didn't give you the complete code. Just like some of our friends do the same thing. So where'd you learn that one, Mr. Model? But yeah, same thing. So I went back, I'm like, great, well, could you provide me the whole thing this time? Sure. And then I went through, just how I started this, I went through and asked it to grade itself, optimize itself, and that's what you saw here today. So it's really cool stuff if you play around with it. Plenty of applications that will not get you fired from your job. And I'm here the rest of the day, so I hope I get to meet you. Thank you for having me. Oh, but first, let's take a selfie. Come on out, Mark. Let's take a selfie. Because, like, when do you see someone you haven't seen in 15 years? And then a bunch of new friends. So let's do it. Oh, my gosh. Say hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you. Thank you.